Hello everyone, welcome to this next video session on Anubhav's Learning series. Today's topic of this learning series video is ABCD. Maybe by looking at this picture, you can see one of the most adored celebrity here. And the topic you can imagine could be anybody can dance, but that's not exactly the topic. The topic is anybody can develop. Those who have taken the training from me on SAP UI5 Fiori very often shoots an email or put a post on my website asking Anubhav, what are all the right practices which we should follow to create a Fiori application which we can confidently deliver to end users without any issues. At times we are able to develop the applications, but we don't know what are all the good practices, best practices to follow, what are all the gold standards to follow. Many of you have asked me, Anubhav, what is the naming convention as far as a SAP UI5 app is concerned? What are all those most important factors which I need to keep it in mind when I develop Fiori apps? Because at times I'm very afraid that if somebody reviews my code, then definitely I may get some comments. So how can I make sure that the work which I do is with the utmost high quality? Please note that this video is relevant for the people who are already comfortable with SAP UI5 and Fiori. Also, probably those who have taken the training from me, because we will be talking here little advanced stuff, not the stuff which we already know. I assume that if you have already taken the training, then you're comfortable with the concepts, which I will not be reiterating in this particular session. Concepts about component.js, router, route match handler, manifest.json, XML views, binding concepts, fragments, formatters, write project structures, OPA 5 and Q unit tests, as well as the best practices to integrate and deploy your application to SAP Gateway System, S4HANA system, and also allowing users to access it via the Launchpad, including the most important bootstrap concept. So without wasting further time, we'll start with the motivation of what could be the motivation for anybody can develop. So some inspirational thought before we start today's class to give you a little bit more propel in this particular topic. So this is a thought from Kevin. Kevin says, anybody can develop a certain amount of talent at something. However, the supremely talented, the superstars, are people who have married a gift of brain wiring to those thousands of hours of practice, usually in favorable circumstances. With this thought, let us go ahead and look it into anybody can develop. Yes, guys, anybody can develop, not just you, your friends, your colleagues. You can also develop, I can also develop, anybody can develop. So these are all the guidelines. When you're developing or already you're starting your development, you need to keep it in mind in different phases of your development to make sure that you create an application which not just delight our end users with experience, but also delight us that we have really created a masterpiece. So moving on to the first set of things here. So let's talk about anybody can develop features. So we will be talking about what are all the best practices you should use while you initialize your Fiori application. What are all the code sanities you need to keep it in mind while you're coding. We'll look at overall stability guidelines as well as things which we need to consider to make our app more stable in context of maybe automated tests. And then finally, we will talk about performance, which is the most important concern at times. You are able to build an app, deliver it, but still it's not giving desired performance as is expected from the end user. And they do keep complaining to you about the performance. So some of these things I will show you in the system on top of the application which we created in our training, so-called Fiori-like application. Some of these features I will be just demonstrating as a guideline as part of the links. So if you carefully observe every point here which is listed down is actually a link. And this link, when you click, you will be able to navigate to the correct guideline, correct page somewhere on the internet, which would give you more insights about that particular topic. Once again, wanted to quickly clarify that these are all my personal experiences which I'm sharing. There could be many more things outside of this which you could find more interesting and you would like to share. So if you would like to share such things, the comment box is open for all of you on this YouTube channel. Please do share your thoughts, your ideas, something which you used in your project would, or probably you would have liked it, the part out of this video, and do let me know in the comment box, because your comments do memorize me. There is a lot I have to do and give more to you. Thanks for helping me achieving 10,000 plus subscribers on my channel, and it's all because of your blessings and your continuous perpetual follow-up on my YouTube channel. Feel free to subscribe to my UI5 Fiori training, including ABAP on HANA and S4 HANA trainings on onlinefioretrainings.com. With that, let's move on. What are all the best practices when you initialize or commence a new project, or you would like to initialize a new Fiori application? Please make sure that you do proper prototyping. Prototyping is the best way to get a look and feel about what is that you're trying to achieve. It allows you to interact with your business users and end users in very early stage of a project, and helps you to understand what or how does the app will look like, what will be the wireframes, what will be the flow between the screens, and gives you an early feedback, an opportunity to correct yourself very early before you really get into the coding. So this is one practice which we all should follow, this is one guideline which we all should follow to make sure that we create an app which actually makes an impact for our end users. So for that, we typically use the build tooling. And if you click on the link, it will redirect you to my YouTube video where I've explained about the build tool. What is the build tool? How can we use the build tool to create a quick prototype using SAP Fiori? Watch out my channel. In upcoming days, I will also show you one video where I will explain you. Once you create the prototype using build tool, you can directly export that and import to WebIDE to create a real Fiori project without minimal effort. Awesome. Moving to the next one, development tools. I have observed that many of you have asked this question many times on different forums. Anubhav, what is the right development tool we should use to create UI5 application? There are different tools in the market. You might have heard about Neptune, Eclipse, or ADT. There are a lot of variety of tools which are there today in the market. My personal recommendation for all of you, those who are working with SAP UI5 and Fiori, is to only and only go with SAP WebIDE. WebIDE is available in two flavors, WebIDE Personal Edition and WebIDE Full Stack in SAP Cloud Platform. So you can use any one of them for developing. You can of course have connectivity and all the features which you would need to develop the right UI5 application. The main feature which WebIDE offers is the template feature. So let me quickly show you that in the system now, one by one, all these features to begin with. So let's start with the development tool quickly. So remember guys, I am assuming that you're already comfortable with SAP UI5 concepts, advanced concepts as well, so that you can understand this whole video. If you are unable to understand at any point of time, feel free to put your comments in the chat box here or in the comments of this video, and I will try to answer your questions right away here itself. If you are very new to SAP UI5, I strongly recommend to subscribe to my SAP UI5 and Fiori course before you really get into further advanced stuff, because your foundation needs to be built properly. And once your foundation is strong, only then you can learn advanced things and make really an impact in your company as well as in your career. All right, let's come back. So this is SAP WebIDE tool, as you already aware, and we have awesome features like creating the app using templates. So we can say new project from template, and now we have here the options to choose out of variety of templates. So those who are already comfortable about all the different variety of artifacts which are used to create Fiori applications, I would strongly recommend you to choose template option to begin with your app development. So this will then create the basic structure, the basic project for your application. It will give you not just a skeleton, but at least 2 or 3 views based on the kind of template you choose. And then you can start adapting your views and adding more code to the controller, and then accordingly you can develop and give a shape to your final application. So always my recommended option is to choose templates and get started an app from the scratch. The template would necessarily generate necessary artifacts in the system, and then it will also give you, I mean, you can be risk-free in if you are just starting with a template option, that your deployment will work or not work. All these things will be making sure. And one important thing which you need to keep note down here is the version which you choose here. So you can see there are 3 versions available. So at times I see you choose a advanced version, let's say 1.52. And now when I go to my SAP system, I would realize that I have a lower version in my SAP system. And then when I deploy this app to SAP system, actually my app becomes incompatible with SAP UI5 framework, and it doesn't work. So how can you quickly check the version of SAP UI5 in your server? So just connect to your SAP server, potentially your SAP Fiori front-end server, and then you can just connect there, go to SICF, and then we have a service name called UI5 underscore UI5, execute that, and then you have this one here, right click and say test the service. And just remember, by the way, this is our S4HANA server instance, which we typically give it to you. And you see the current version which we have in this server is 1.60, which means any application up to this version will beautifully work when I deploy them in this server. Okay, so you can access this server from your local computer. That's the beauty of this server. In fact, it has integration with Launchpad, Launchpad Designer, Theme Designer, WebIDE, Full Stack also can be integrated with this server. So if you want to know more about server, please do write me an email. The email ID is given in the description of this video. I will put it. Also, this PPT which you are seeing, I will put a link in the description of this video for this PPT. So you all can download this PPT and use it for explanation to others, or also probably to look into these guidelines more in detail. Awesome. So that's one thing. When you are choosing the version, this is a very often common mistake which people does when they create an app using template. They put a version and their server version is very less. So finally when you deploy this app, it will stop working in the server because it doesn't find the necessary prerequisite UI5 libraries required to run this app based on the version. Awesome. So that's one feature which you should keep it in mind. And likewise, there are lots of features like extensibility feature, the extensibility tools embedded as part of WebIDE. It works like a reverse proxy. So you can connect to your dev system, Q system, P system with the same project. You can you have a very good integration with GitHub. So if you want to know more about the advantage of SAP WebIDE over Eclipse, just in case you're using Eclipse in your company, then I would recommend you to go and check my video on WebIDE versus Eclipse on the YouTube. Okay, now coming back, so that's about the development tool, which should keep it in mind while we initialize a new project. Now comes the project structure, very important. Every project has certain artifacts and they need to be placed and grouped under right project structure. As you have already attended my training, you already aware that when we develop the code, the golden rule which we followed is no copy paste of code. And never learn from trainers who are teaching you copy paste, because they are just kind of running away from their responsibility due to lack of time or could be inexperience. We have developed this application without any copy paste of code, and we understand meaning of every single line and every single artifact which we create here. What is an app view, what is a master view, what is a detail view, what is a controller, what is a namespace, what is scaffolding template, what is a model, what is a local model, the binding concept, the internationalization, the fragments, the formatters, the custom theming, the custom control, component JS, router, root match handler, manifest JSON, list goes on and on and on. And all of these things we had kept in the system one by one. By understanding every single line of code, guys, that's the beauty. That's why you get the depth of the subject, and you will be able to do much more better job than your colleagues in the team. So you should always follow the same project structure: your controllers, your custom controls, your custom CSS, fragments, your IETN files for language and translation, your model, view, and all your component.js, manifest, and index.html will be part of the main web app folder. We already know that when we create these objects, we always give a namespace, and that namespace we define it here as part of our index.html data as API UI resource routes, where we give our namespace corresponding to our namespace defined in our team. So, and then this is the bootstrap piece of code. Of course, there are some guidelines which we will be learning in a minute about how to speed up the loading of the bootstrap, probably doing an asynchronous load so that system would load these libraries asynchronously. It won't take much time and browser doesn't get locked because of that. Awesome. We'll do that in a minute. We'll explain and learn about these guidelines. So now next is that's the project structure we should follow. Now what about the names of the folders and files? So whenever you create folders and files, they always starts with small letters, as you can see here. They all starts with small letters. The files which you create these files and the folders which you create, typically they all starts with small letter, and then further they follow camel case. So you see more data fragment. So M is small and D is capital. Supplier data, S is small, D is capital. So they follow camel case further on, just the way our JavaScript variables and function name follows, same naming convention. However, there is an exception here for manifest as well as component.js. Component.js always starts with C capital, because that's exactly what SAP UI5 engine, runtime engine, will look forward for with the file with the capital C. Okay, so at times I've seen people keep this as a small c and then they come back complaining it's not working. The reason is simple. SAP UI5 framework, when you try to execute this app, or when you integrate with Launchpad, it tries to look at your root folder, which is web app directory. Under that, a file with component.js, which inherits from UI component directory. UI component JavaScript. So that's exactly what system does. So make sure that your component.js is an exception here. The name should start with C. Rest all, you should follow the proper naming convention. In terms of views, we always start with capital letter. So view names always start with capital letter, and rest all follows the camel case. However, more detailed guideline is given here. You can just click on this link, and then this will open up so I'm just going to right click, say open hyperlink, and now it will take you to the guideline about the names of the folders as well as files. So there you go, it takes you to the names, and you see folder names must not have spaces, should avoid the module loading with the URL handling in general. Single folder name must not be longer than 40 characters. Two resource names must not only differ in the case. Avoid the non-ASCII characters in the resource name. So these are some general guidelines about the file names, which you should keep it in mind while coding the files or keeping the files in your UI5 projects as an artifact. Awesome. So that's about the guidelines in terms of files and folder names. Now coming to service usage, very important guideline, guys. Service uses, OData service uses I'm talking about actually precisely. So OData service usage. There are certain guidelines here which I observed in by looking at lot of Fiori application in my implementation project. The first guideline which I have observed, in fact, the apps which I analyzed, which SAP delivered as part of standard Fiori package, we have observed that most of the Fiori apps, or I would say all the Fiori apps, or I would say a Fiori app should always consume one OData service. So basically the relation between Fiori app and OData is one-to-one, which is a best practice. Again, guys, you can violate best practice. Okay, it's not like you cannot, it's your choice. My duty is to teach you these best practices. My duty is to give you my experiences. Yet it's up to you to choose what you want to do. There is a possibility that one Fiori app can point to multiple OData services. You got to create multiple models, and as you all know that there will be always one default model, and all the other models is going to be named model. So we typically have or make sure that there's one OData service per app. That's a general guideline which we follow as a gold standard in everywhere whenever we create a Fiori application. Now, why it is, the reason being, the OData model considered to be the default model, and if at all you have to include multiple services, then your default model would be actually not just one OData. There will be a lot of models with the name model, and when the name or model call concept comes into picture, it becomes little complicated to use. At times you forget the name to refer in the binding and other places, and then it starts creating problems. So keep this clean. Just make sure that you have one service which is consumed by one app, so it's a one-to-one relationship. Second important thing is, when we create services, try to create model, use manifest.json. Don't create the default model for OData using code. So you can use sap.ui.model.odata.v2.odata model. That object you can create just the way we saw it in our course, but never do that. Always use manifest.json to declare this model as a default model and the OData URL. The third important guideline, I'll show you the second point also in the system. The third important guideline is never hard code the host and port number to the as a OData URL. Now I'll tell you the disadvantage of this. So first let's look at the second point in the system now. So we go back here and go to manifest, and you would observe that here we have added the data source, and that's my OData service which I'm calling, and this is going to create an OData model, and you see this is the URL I had put. So always use this technique to create your default model. And if you just observe Anubhav service, come down, you see this is the data source, and that's my default model. So blank means default model. However, I have another model called local, which is a JSON model. So this data source here is the default model, which is ultimately creating my OData model here. So that's the good practice. Never write down the code, JavaScript code, to create this model, because then it's not the good practice, because we always follow the manifest convention to create any global models. And now the second important point is this guy. You see here, I just put the path prefix. I did not put here my HTTP, my, let's say, my server dot my domain.com colon 8080 or whatever port number. I'd never put that. Okay, and you should never do. The reason being, guys, this whole thing is actually managed by server. So the moment you deploy this app in the server, it is, this first part will be taken by default from the server automatically, because you will run the app, you will be given given a hashtag, and then the host name and port number will be already there, and that is what system will pick it up automatically. However, for connectivity from WebIDE to test this, we always use this new app. As you all know, in the course we discussed about new app, where we can give the destination to connect to the target system, and just we have to here change to prod or quality to just connect to different system to test my app locally in WebIDE. But when it comes to real work, never ever by mistake or intentionally or unintentionally ever put this URI here with the host name and port number. Never. I'll tell you the disadvantage if you do that. System, you deploy the app, it will work probably, but the problem will be, let's say you have a dev system, and the host name for the dev system is, let's say, dev.myhost.com. That's your dev system, and that's the URL you have hard coded in your app now. Now, this is the Fiori app then, and this Fiori app is happily talking to the OData service with this hard-coded dev.myhost.com, which you had hard-coded. So you have hard-coded that in the Fiori app actually, and now Fiori app conveniently talking to this this dev system. Now what you do is you deploy this app in the dev system, and then you transport it to the quality system. Now, when this reaches to the quality system, this app, so in the quality system, of course, quality system, your QLT system, it's this URL is different because there's some different quality system. It's a different system. So of course, port number is subjected to change, the URL host subjected to change, but your app which you transported is still having the hard-coded URL for domain as your development system. So even though you run the app in the quality system, it is still connecting to the dev system, and it's loading and communicating and getting all the data from dev system. And at times the situation gets so worse that people doesn't find out this issue, and somehow the app reaches to production system, and there also in the production it's still connecting to the dev system because you hard coded the host name and port number in the URL, and that becomes a big challenge. And at times people with very less experience, they can't even find out this is the issue. Okay, and that becomes really a big problem. And actually I have seen in my early days of learning UI5 that developers often used to do this mistake, especially in Eclipse based projects. They used to do this mistake. They used to put this whole URL and then ship it, and then even it is in the production, it's still connecting to dev system unknowingly, and they're working with it, and then they suddenly realize, oh my god, this data is getting corrupted or getting changed. And then they realize, oh my god, they have hard coded this URL here, host name and port number, and it's always connecting to dev system. So never do that, because you should leave it like this with the path prefix and the service name. And at times I've also seen in service they put entity set name here, which is also bad approach, because you are not going to communicate with only one entity. This entity set will be used for binding rather than you should never code it here. You're actually communicating service, so only your immaculate service URL should come here with the path prefix, and that's what exactly you should ship as part of manifest. This is another important fact or cause of issue which people face. Many of you have also come back, Anubhav. This is an interview question people ask. What are all the common issues you have observed when you're working with UI5 apps? So these are all some things which you can tell in interview that, yeah, I observed this kind of issues, and this was the root cause of these issues, and we fixed. How did we fix it? Okay. Next important thing, when you're working with OData services, make sure that these OData services supports the desired operation. Like paging, searching, filtering. So at times people say, Anubhav, I have implemented a filter on UI, but it's not working. Reason being, we have done our job as a UI developer, but on the backend side also, these things needs to be supported. So on the backend side, if the paging is not supported, filtering is not supported, no matter how much code you do on the front end side to make a call to that OData service, that OData service will always give you the full response, the full body response. It won't filter or sort or search or exactly, truncate or the data which you really need on the UI. So keep these things in mind, that there can be bug in OData service. Do proper error handling with the metadata loading as well. Suppose you started an OData service and the metadata itself did not load. So make sure that it loads, you do handling for metadata as well. So when you generate the app from template, system generates something called errorhandler.js, which will have all this metadata promise, which takes care of just in case metadata fails. So these are all some certain service guidelines you should keep it in mind while working with it. So that's about first initial setup, initial look and feel. So in our next session, we will talk about what are all the code guidelines. So we will be having a series of sessions. So stay tuned to my channel, and I will see you in the next channel where we'll talk about this second pillar about code guidelines which we should follow while coding a good UI5 application. Thank you so much. Please do subscribe to this channel if you've not done that. Do let me know your thoughts about this session. If you enjoyed it, did you like it? Don't forget to download this PPT given in the description of this video, and please do like, share, subscribe to this video. If you feel this is usable and this can help also others, then please do share it with your team members. If you're working in as a lead in a UI5 project, do share it with all the Fiori developers in your team, and so that they can understand these basic rules, and they make sure that the basic sanity is kept in mind while coding. We'll see you in the next session with more guidelines on the code, and then stability, and then finally the performance. Thank you so much, and catch you up again. Goodbye.